Hi, welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about activist art in Canada, and we're going to have a look at a particular case study involving Rebecca Belmore in the Grange home, a building attached to the Art Gallery of Ontario. The social and economic problems that Native people in Canada face and struggle through is reflected in their art. At various times in Canadian history, First Nations have taken an activist role, sometimes lined up against government and institutions such as police, and they've taken up activist environmental roles as well. If we're going to take a serious look at Native contemporary arts in Canada and not simply accept their marginal status, but instead see their art as something more, something disruptive to the colonial narrative that focuses on the so-called never-ending struggle with colonial powers, which presents natives as a perennial victim, then we're going instead to have to look at art that empowers Native people. And activist art is a good way to do that. First, let's get a working definition of activist art started. What if we said that activist art has a social conscience and that it has a political intent with the desire to make change in the world around us? Changing behaviors mostly. Let's say that activist art had its modern roots in the 1960s, coinciding with the rise of political activism and the anti-Vietnam era and the civil rights movement. Then we can look at the specific case of Native people in Canada and say that one can tell a small narrative, and then you get to thinking about how a small narrative might help us rethink the grand narratives in Canadian art history. So let's start this way. In 2001, a collection of Native artists were invited to participate in an intervention at the Art Gallery of Ontario, and I was there at the time and saw it. Historically, Native artists were underrepresented at the AGO, so this exhibition in the Grange home was intended to be a way of redressing that oversight. Now I should point out that the Grange, which is a heritage home built in 1817, and was the first site of the Art Gallery or the Art Museum of Toronto, and is still physically attached to the Ontario Art Gallery, is a significant colonial place with its very strong colonial narratives. The Grange, a heritage home built in 1817, was the first site of the Art Museum of Toronto and is still physically attached to the Ontario Art Gallery. The Grange was a significant site to hold an intervention because it was built by the Bolton family, who were members of the Family Compact, a group of prominent European migrants who were both wealthy and politically powerful in the new colony. Among the artists asked to intervene in the Grange space was the prominent artist Rebecca Belmore, who we've already seen in this course. So during Belmore's performance, she slept in one of the four-poster beds, wrapped in a bedspread trimmed with her own black hair and a beaver pelt. She asserted her personal heritage into the colonial space, contested the colonial space of the Grange, and created a modern expression of her native culture and heritage. The point of the exhibition and intervention at the AGO was to get visitors to the Grange to re-examine the stories of that building and its relationship with First Nations. Visitors to the Grange were typically presented with a neutral view of history by elderly women dressed in period costume, so this was quite a departure. Let's come to class ready to talk about how Belmore's narrative might be part of a larger story of Native artists living and working in Canada.